Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and today's episode is 81. We're going to be talking about training plan creation. And so how I'm going to describe how we're going to go about this process over the next couple episodes is I'm going to create an analogy. This is like us building a house. So in this conversation for this episode, we're going to lay the foundation. We're going to pour the concrete footers. We're going to lay the concrete slab in order to build the house. And then we're going to frame the house. And so the way that we can look at this is that we're going to talk about how we as coaches talking to a new athlete, what are the things that we have to do before we even start talking about workouts, before we even start talking about training plans? How do we lay that groundwork? What are the questions that we have to ask people in order to start the conversation on how to develop this plan? That's the foundation. Then we start to frame the house. So we're putting up the 2x4s and everything else. We're going to create the frame of the house. And we're going to talk about how do we manage and create the weekly volume. All we're looking at is if this is an 8-week plan, how do we set each week's total volume? And how do we want to grow that? How do we want to manage it? Are we talking about 4 weeks on, 1 week off in terms of, rollback weeks? How do we lay the foundation? How do we set this framework so that before we can even go in to create workouts, which is going to be part 2 of the series? And we're going to go in and we're going to say, now that we've got all this weekly volume, we're going to parse this weekly volume out into days and in workouts. And how do we sequence these workouts in a way that keeps the athlete healthy and able to progress forward so that when they reach that starting line on race day, they are the best prepared they can possibly be. They are as healthy as they can be in order to have the day that they want. So that's going to be the process over the next couple episodes here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. So thank you guys for joining us, and we're going to dive right on in. So the way that we can look at this is because I tend to focus on multi-sport, which is a very different method for building training plans than what maybe Katie would use as runners. And the reason that I say that is because running, just the nature of running is a high impact on the body. It can beat the body down if you're not already at a point where you can handle that volume. And so maybe the way that Katie would create a training plan for a runner may be significantly different than the way that I would build a training plan for, let's say, a triathlete or a cyclist or swimmer, where you do have some non-impact sport within the overall umbrella of what we're training for. And so there's a way to manage that volume. We may grow different aspects of the training plan at faster rates than others. I may grow the cycling portion of a training plan faster or more aggressively than I would grow the run portion of a triathlete training plan. So let's start the conversation. So Katie, I'm going to create a scenario here for you. And you have somebody who's coming to you who is new to the sport. I don't even know if race distance matters all that much, if we're talking about a true beginner. So, but let's just assume, for simplicity's sake, that it's going to be a short course, right? Which is where naturally a beginner would want to start. So we're talking 5K, 10K, maybe the little 10 milers. Something that's definitely less than a half marathon. That's where we're starting. And this person is let's assume that they are effectively couched to whatever it is that they want to train for.
Brand new, yeah.
What is the conversation like between you and this athlete before you start talking about training plans and volumes? What sort of things are you asking and trying to gather information so that you know how to create the framework of the training plan?
Have you been running at all? Or is this are you truly just inspired to do a race? And then so it's just basically getting any idea of their current fitness level. What are they doing for exercise? Are they running at all? Is there any running happening? Or are they just inspired to do a race? Or are they doing anything, Peloton or some sort of weekly classes? Is there a base level of fitness or not? So let's just assume here that there's a little somebody that maybe goes out and jogs a couple miles, or maybe
Reasonable.
they just run a little bit, or maybe even, yeah, just a little bit of running, and maybe they do some other exercise classes or something, like maybe Peloton or a cycling class. And so there's a little bit of fitness already. I'm basically really just going to start pretty slow. It might be, I'm probably not going to have them run generally every day. It'd be like every other day, and maybe just progressing that to a couple hours of running initially, like an hour, maybe two, slowly, just kind of over the course of like a couple weeks, seeing how they're doing with it. Like maybe it's a run walk kind of program like we've talked about
Mhm.
before, where maybe I'm having them even start there. Like, let's just have you run a couple minutes, walk a minute, progress it up that way. So that's like truly, it's not even about vol, because at that point, yeah, you don't want to go from 0 to 10 miles all at once, but it's just sort of slowly kind of getting them used to running, and the time they're running is shorter at each time, and there's more like recovery in between, and then you're sort of building up from there. And so once I kind of get them up to a baseline of maybe like 5 or 10 miles a week, or maybe a couple hours, 2 3 hours a week, then it's kind of like, then it's more scientific maybe with that. It's just sort of like, let's then, that 5 to 10% principle, slowly increasing it. We'll talk more about the weekly, how the week looks, but that's kind of how I'm approaching that. Very, very beginner.
Okay.
So it's kind of a slow process, and like a run walk program or something like that, just to get them there. And then obviously, depending on when they want to run the race and their goals, kind of working around that. But that's probably what I would approach for a newbie runner.
Well, let's take
um,
it one.
but not even
Yeah.
intensity. It's just like, it's just purely just to get them to be able to complete a 5K or
Yeah.
a 10K, right? We're not even talking any intensity. I'm not giving them speed workouts. I'm not giving them track workouts. It's none of that really for new runners. Just like, let's just have you get to the point where you can hopefully maybe run the whole race and actually run it. I might talk a little bit about pacing so they don't go out full throttle for the first half mile and then die, but it won't be like any sort of, other than maybe like short, maybe just to get the leg turnover a little bit if they're comfortable with it, doing some short like strides and things like that. But it's very much just the running portion. There's not even anywhere like real structured workouts in the sense of like intensity or um it's just, okay, run this distance,
Yeah.
run this time, run, walk, So that's how I'd approach
So
that. Very, very beginner.
let's take it even one step back a little bit. So let's say that this person
Mhm.
comes to you and you're having your initial consultation with them, and you're just kind of getting to know them a little bit. What are some of the questions that you would ask a new somebody who's coming to you for the consultation before we start talking training plans and methods and things like
Yeah.
that? What questions are you asking them?
I think, like, I'd wanna know kinda what inspired them to
Okay.
wanna work with me, like, what's their why for doing what they're doing, because that's important to me to know. Why? Like, why do you wanna do this now? Like, is there something that is inspiring you? Because then I want to use that information to hopefully help continue to motivate them, because it's hard. When you start running can be hard. It's not always easy. So finding that why, so I can help be their coach and help motivate them. But then I'm asking them about their life, like,
Okay.
is there what time do they have to put towards this every day? Like, do they have an hour a day to, even though I might not initially be prescribing that much exercise, like, how much time do they have when, those questions of just generally when, like, when they typically work out,
Okay.
basically like those basic background questions, and then stress, life, other stuff like, do you have kids? Do you have a job? Like, tell me more about your date, your week, your schedule, so that I kind of know what's going on in their lives a little bit. If they're an executive super busy with like 3 kids, is, they're what I want them to accomplish. I mean, it just might be a little different than somebody that maybe has a little bit more time on their
Yeah.
hands. So I just need to know a lot. I ask a lot of questions, and then again, like, what they're currently doing fitness wise, and then kind of building from there. Like, then I'm thinking, okay, day to day also, is there certain days you can't run, like certain days you have to not do anything,
Okay.
like what are your weekends like? Just everything like that. And then it's building from there,
Okay.
kind of getting more in detail. Yeah.
So your approach with somebody like that is you start talking about, what's your why? So why is it that you want to do this?
Mhm.
And availability is kind of your two big
Pretty
your
much.
two big
Yeah.
things. Okay.
The availability and then just like, yeah, like life
Yeah.
stress, what's kind of going on in your life. But I think the why is important. If someone's like, I just want to do a 5K because I want to lose some weight, it's, I might have a conversation with them about that in a deeper way of like, okay, like, is this, because that to me is not a generally a deep enough
Makes
why. Because
sense.
when you're out there, you're like, this sucks. I don't like running. Like, you're gonna you're not gonna be able to stick with it, so it's just like I need to know, especially if someone's a newbie coming at me, like, with wanting help, I need to know their why and then maybe digging a little deeper, like, "Okay, well, tell me more about that," like, so it is a little bit of an interview of, like, trying to figure them out and figure out, like, yeah, injury, like, it's just
Yeah.
questions about any injuries, any, like, issues with, in the past, if they've done sports in the past, have they ever done running? Have they ever been on a running team in cross country in high school? Just all those like background questions of like what, get me so I get to know their experience too. Like maybe they did run a lot at one point and they stopped. So maybe they do have more experience. They just haven't been running in a while. So it's like you have to kind of gather all of this information and yeah, and any injury history, any issues they have physically, like, it anything,
Yeah.
I mean, do they have, like, a one leg longer than the other? I don't know. Just anything that might be important that you'd wanna make sure to note so that you're keeping that in mind. When you're building something, you're kinda asking them about it, making sure you're checking in so that they don't get injured. I mean, as coaches, we really wanna we really, like, prefer our athletes to keep them healthy,
Right.
right? So they can accomplish what they've hired us to do,
Yeah.
to help them with, so, yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think
know
for me,
if you have anything to add,
yeah.
anything you ask
I
more.
think for me, the two things that I tend to focus on is the availability and the injury history is kind of the two
Uh-huh.
things that I tend to focus on. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm not too I don't really typically ask a whole lot of, what's your why questions. And which I find it fascinating
Mhm.
that was like one of the
I
first
think
that
that's
was one of the first
important
things that you
for
said
me
that
to
you
ask.
asked them is the why,
Yeah,
where I don't typically ask that. And I think
'cause I feel like that's the key though. Why are you? Because endurance sports, especially something like a triathlon or somebody that, I don't know, anything like a 5K, like, it's hard it's not easy,
yeah,
like, well, so to me, it's like if their why isn't deep enough, they're just kind of like had this inspiration all of a sudden to train for something. I feel like I'm gonna lose them if their why isn't
yeah,
there and I haven't had that conversation, right? So I don't want my athletes to decide like a month in that it's too, hopefully I'm still having those conversations with them, but I don't want them to be like, oh, I just wanted to lose some weight and this is like a lot harder than I thought it was
yeah,
gonna be and this sucks and I'm not gonna do it. If their why, if the reason they're signing up is a little not, or they don't see, it seems like they don't have enough, like, I don't know the right word, like of a
like
why, like, and
superficial
I can't
why is what
parse
you're
that
saying.
out.
So
Yeah, and so that's why I like to
yeah,
ask more questions. It's like, okay, well, is there something that happened that, that made you think, okay, I'm gonna do this and then hopefully try to lose some weight? Is it and then it's like, oh yeah, my grandma had diabetes. I don't know.
yeah,
Like, I don't wanna have diabetes, or I have kids and I wanna be able to run around with them and play, and I wanna show them what it's like to be a healthy person that
uh,
goes towards a goal. So, okay, there.
right,
That's a good why. Now every time you tell me this is hard, I'm gonna be like, "Okay, but your kids are watching you, and you are setting an example for your
yeah,
kids to be healthy and do exercise. So that is why you're getting up tomorrow morning and you're gonna do this workout,
yeah.
like, so that's important
Yeah,
to
I
me.
definitely
That's
think it's important, but it's definitely not in the top two or three questions that I asked. So I think that was
interesting.
pretty
Yeah.
interesting that it
Mhm.
was right up there for you with like the first or second question that you would ask somebody. So yeah, for me. I think that it is availability. So it's more of the lifestyle questions. What's your life like? Do you have a high demanding job? Do you travel a lot? Do you have kids? How active are the kids? Um, are you married? Are there how do you guys travel a lot? So that's going to tell me how easy is it going to be for these maybe longer sessions, which typically will happen on the weekend. But if they're always traveling somewhere with the weekend, that's going to create some friction between the athlete and myself in trying to get them or for them to execute the sessions that I've designed for them to do. So I think availability is probably the first one, and then my injury related questions, because I need to be able to know when I start to build the plan, what things do I have to keep in my mind, and how to manage the stress that they're going to be under. If I'm dealing,
Mhm.
I coached somebody one time. I built a training plan for her, and she had a really, really bad knee. So I think it was like an ACL thing where she had basically torn it when she was in high school and has never been replaced and never been fixed. And so when she
Mhm.
runs, like the knee just kind of like it moves to the left and right, but she's moving north and south. And so when I watched her run, I was like, oh my
Right.
God, I don't know how to coach this person because I don't want to completely break them. So I had to keep that in mind, in terms of how much stress am I going to induce on this athlete and how am I going to manage that stress? So the injury history is probably,
That's
number
important.
two
Yeah,
that I
very
would
important.
ask. And I
Yeah.
think I
Mhm.
think a lot of it is because it's a lot that I've had to deal with in terms of setbacks and injuries and things. So it's
Right.
really prominent in my mind because I have to do the same thing for myself. When I go to sit down and develop my plan, I have to keep that in mind. It's like, okay,
Right.
is
It's
it
true.
winter time where I tend to have joint issues, and what can and can't I do during the winter time, but I can do in the summer. So it tells me how I can progress my plan and maybe do focus blocks of things. Um, so I think that's number two that I would ask for somebody. And then I think before the conversation ends, I definitely kind of bring up the why, because I do agree with you. I think that it's important for them to
Mhm.
have. I don't see. I don't want to take
Yeah.
on the role of determining whether I think that their why is
No, I mean,
strong
I'm
enough. It
not
just has to be strong
not
enough
like
for
that's
them.
not the role I'm taking on, but
Yeah,
I want them to think about it. I need them that's important. I've worked enough as a dietitian. I've seen enough people have very yeah, if your only goal is to something superficial, you're not gonna stick with it. I've had clients
yeah,
who just their goal was so superficial that they when it going got tough, the tough I guess I don't know what's the right word, but, like, yeah, they don't stick to it, and I know that, and it's like it's not so much I won't work with them, it's more like I'll coach them a little bit to be like and I'm not, like, a mental health, like, professional, but, I mean,
yeah,
I take on many roles as a coach and a dietitian, I'm not it's like a health coach, I'm sometimes, like, a cheerleader, so, like, what I do is that's important to me, but it's not like, "Oh, your why is not deep enough." It's just making sure that, okay, well, I dig a little deeper. Like, what is because there's usually, like, a deeper why. It's not usually so superficial, but I find if I don't ask those questions and get them really thinking about it, like, "Oh, really, why am I wanting to do this? What is it?"
yeah,
I find that when it does get tough, they don't stick to it as well, or they tend to fall off, or they're like, "Oh, they don't complete the workout or something. So that I can also bring that in when it does get tough and or give them some suggestions of like, okay, this is you're thinking about your I don't know, you're doing this for you want to complete a marathon because you want to do it for cancer because your dad died of cancer. I want you to stick that picture of your dad on your like somewhere where you see it every morning when you
mhm,
get up before you do your workout. You're looking at that picture of your dad. Stuff like that cuz yes, I'm not a psychologist, but I want my athletes to be successful, and I know that sometimes for myself, when I'm struggling, I have to have a real meaningful reason why I'm gonna get up every day and do the work. Otherwise, it's hard to keep going and doing it.
yeah.
So it helps people, and I think that's in my opinion, really very important. So
Yeah, it definitely
yeah.
it does give you some insight, and I'll admit that I've struggled with this as a coach before, where they when they hired me, I think that they hired me as a way to think that it was going to make them disciplined, and motivated.
Oh,
That, by having a coach, that it was going to be my job to say, all right, put your shoes on, let's go, kind of thing.
yeah.
Where it's almost kind of like this parent-child relationship. And I will admit that I may not have handled those situations very well, because I didn't quite understand, what they were trying to get from me, and what they were trying to get from me was not necessarily a plan. They were trying to get motivation from me. And the way that I view this in terms of coaching and motivation, and sometimes I waver on this, is that it's really not my job to motivate you. It's my job to
Yeah.
guide you
No, I
and
agree with you.
support you, and build a plan that makes you as prepared as we possibly can be, and while keeping you healthy. The motivation is on you. I'm not
Mhm.
going to be by your
Well, you need to
bedside
tell
saying, "Hey,
people
crack the
that,
whip, let's
though.
go,"
Yeah.
kind of thing. But
Yeah. You
you
have to
know,
tell people that, though. You can't
yeah,
assume people know that. So it's not that I'm asking the why because I need to motivate them every day. I think that helps them think about why they're doing it. But I generally will have a conversation like that. Like, I'm giving you the, training, especially if I'm finding that they're not doing
yeah,
it or something's happening. It's kind of those questions of like, what's going on? And then it's like, I can't be there to like cheer you on every day or check in with you every single day to see if you've done the workouts. Like, I'll check in with you. Don't get me wrong. I definitely like to be involved, but I can't call you
right,
in the morning and make sure you're going to do
right,
your workout every day. You know what I mean? Or be there physically. So like that is something I think that needs to be sort of, I don't generally think you need to necessarily say that, but if you're starting to get that vibe, like
yeah,
it is a conversation that needs to have. The reason I think the why thing for me is just more to get them really thinking about that because I do think it is something that they can leverage and I can leverage to
agreed.
help
Yep,
them, maybe motivate a little bit, but I'm not thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna take over the role of cheerleader and be their full motivation." And that's the other thing is, like, I feel like if sometimes it gets to the bottom of it, if they really do not have a very deep why, and they maybe were just told or felt like, "I'm just doing this because I don't know, my friend is doing it and
yeah,
I feel like I need to do something or
yep,
something like that, then and you're just asking the question, then you can kind of almost like parse out the people who are not going to really be able that
yeah,
aren't like internally motivated and aren't, are going to struggle with the workouts because, I'll keep asking questions until I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like your reason for doing this is very strong. I suggest you find like, and I'll explain that to them. Like, the
right,
reason I'm asking this is because it's hard to train for something and it's going to take dedication and I can't be there every day to cheer you on and make sure you're doing the workouts. So I recommend really thinking about why you want to do this and really having something that's going to motivate you when the going gets tough.
yeah,
When you have to wake up and it's dark outside and cold or whatever, like that's when it's going to get hard. So you need to have something that's going to get you out there
yeah,
because I can't be the one at 5 a.m. calling, trying to motivate you to go out. I have my own stuff,
yeah,
right? Like I can't do that for all my athletes. So that's the reasoning I think is just to be able to get to the bottom of that a little bit more and then have those
yeah,
conversations. For me, sometimes the conversations, I guess, in that sense can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it
necessary.
helps, I
Yeah,
think, it's
yep,
necessary, yeah. So it's kind of top of my list for that reason because I wanna parse out, like, why do you wanna do this to begin with?
yeah,
Okay, so we have or maybe they're like a long-term athlete, maybe they already have a lot of motivation. I still ask those questions, like, it's helpful, like, "Oh, you wanna do another marathon or you're trying to get this PR, like, what is your sort of why for that?" Because, like, I ran into if it's all outcome based, it's all because you want the PR, that can be troublesome too because you're not maybe doing it because you absolutely love the process and you're so hooked on the outcome. So it's just getting the bottom of that. And yes, sometimes I do think my role sometimes does become a little bit more asking the deep questions and helping people work through that so that they can enjoy it. I want them to enjoy it too. I
yeah,
don't want them to be, so I think it's just part of why I ask. So it can be from the beginner to somebody very experienced. They still want to ask that question and then all the other questions about life and of course injury are also important. So like I would say my top 3 would be like the why, the life, like just their life schedule, like injury, I think like, yeah, like obviously that kind of goes with the availability and then like timing of workouts, all that stuff. But I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would put
Yeah.
in those would be my top three questions, I think. So, and I don't know if there's any other questions. I guess little questions here and there about their life,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah.
find that people that are outcome driven people um,
Hmm.
typically are harder to stay motivated or harder to motivate
Right.
than process
Hmm.
driven people. Process driven people, I
Absolutely.
don't have to say, hey, did you do your workout today? They did it because they bought into
Hmm.
the process. Outcome oriented people, those are the ones that I have to pay a little bit more attention to, and saying, okay, if
Right.
I start to see like a couple days of reds and training peaks and I know that they're outcome driven, that's when I start to ask questions like, hey, what's going on? Is there something that you need to tell me? Is there something, is there some kind of breakdown of communication there? And that's when I kind of step in. But usually
Hmm.
outcome or process driven people, I really don't have a problem motivating them because they're self-motivated.
Right.
They've bought
Absolutely.
in.
Yeah, I think that's why it's kind of important to
Yeah.
ask those
Yeah.
questions of people so you kind of know where their motivation comes from and if you can kind of drive them a little bit more. I can't it's like, yeah, I don't know if have enough background in psychology to move someone from like being outcomes to like more process motivated, but I think it's just having some conversations with them about it and being like, well, what happens if you do everything right and something happens on race day and you don't get that PR? Like just kind of asking some deeper questions sometimes in our calls, and just being, and not that I don't want them to be successful, but just like you know so what can we do each day to enjoy it?
Yeah.
Like, what can we sort of get out of the process a little more and kind of and diving deeper into that. So yeah,
All right.
um, those are
All right. So the reason that,
yeah. So let's
yeah,
move on.
I know that people dialed into this thing and they're just like, when are we going to start talking about training plans?
Talk about
But I think that this conversation is really important because, like I described in the beginning, it's laying the foundation. We're laying the groundwork for how to build this training plan. And so, if you're self-coached and you're sitting out there today and you're just like, I need to find a way to build this plan. So how do I go about doing it? The reason is I want you to ask yourself these same questions that we would be asking you.
Mhm.
What's your why? How much time do you realistically have available? Not how much time do
Realistically,
you think that you have? How much time do you
right?
actually have available to you that you know
And that
that
might
you
be
could
like
execute?
an exercise of, like, going through your day
Yes.
and don't just be like, "Oh, I definitely have 10 hours just willy-nilly." Like, go through and look at your daily schedule and, like, think about, "Okay, when would I be able to do the training and how much time can I block off?" Like, would it be at night or in the morning or during the day somewhere? And then kinda add it up and sort of see,
Yeah.
don't just assume you have all this time because sometimes we can find time, but sometimes we can't, and then you've over, scheduled yourself,
I
right?
think
So
when I work with people, I think I find more people that overestimate their availability than underestimate their availability. I
uh-huh,
think most of the people that I come across would say, "Yeah, I have 8 hours a week that I can train, but realistically, it's like closer to 5." So
5, right.
if I go in and
Mhm,
I build a
mhm.
plan that is conducive to an 8 hour a week athlete, I've already overloaded them with stuff that they're not going to be able to do, and they're not going to be able to buy
Yeah.
into that process because they overestimated their availability. And
I
so,
think with the volume too, because it's what we're gonna talk about, I mean, I think that's why I always like to figure out where they're at, currently with their, um, current volume, and then as we're building it slowly, there might become a point in time where they're like this um, they're just not able to complete more volume,
right,
like because it takes time. So if you're taking someone who's already doing 5 hours and they're like, I want to do 10, well, they're already doing five. So they can do five, based off what they're telling you. And you start, slowly increasing that. There may be like a point in time where it's like that at 7 or 8 hours where you start to add more volume and they're kind of like, okay, I don't have more time, right?
yeah.
And so then that's the limiting factor for their volume, So in an optimal world, you would be able to, depending on what race you are wanting to do, you would maybe slowly ramp up the volume and the time you're doing it until you kind of get to a max,
Yeah.
right? At least, we'll talk a little bit about how we think about that. But I think it sometimes is just like self-limiting a little bit because they'll realize, "Oh, I actually don't have 10 hours, I only have 8 maybe," and so that's okay, well, that's where you're gonna cap out at, I guess, and then we have to, like, then maybe bring in different elements into that 8 hours,
Yeah.
so, like, maybe intensity and whatever, but it's sometimes, that's when we talk about volume, and that's where we're gonna go, is, like, sometimes the limiting factor is just how much time you have. I think a lot of people get caught up by like, oh, like so and so, this elite athlete is doing 140 miles a week, or, and I think unfortunately we have that comparison game. I know I do that a little bit myself sometimes, like, oh, well, more is better. And if I get more volume,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be better. But it always comes down to like, there's only so much time in the day and there's going to be like a cap at what volume you can do. And that's unfortunately for us people who don't get paid for running and training and triathlon,
Yeah.
that's sometimes where the limit is. And so I think that's where it's so important to kind of have those conversations because you kind of know um, what you're at and then what maybe the max you can get at. And that's going to be really in terms of hours or, usually I think it's kind of hours per week. This is where
Yeah.
hours works well, like time, because you might not be able to get more than that. And that's where the volume probably will end up maxing out, right? So but we don't wanna start at 10 hours.
Right.
You don't wanna go from like, "Well, I have 10 hours, so I'm gonna go from 5 to 10 hours next week." And I mean, maybe for running, I might be able to do that
Bad.
a little bit more
Yeah.
for triathlon. I mean, I don't know if I would
No.
recommend going from 5 to 10 hours of total aerobic volume, but you could probably increase it a little bit more for triathlon because, like you said, the cycling and the swimming are less impact, but you don't wanna do that for running for sure. You'll be injured for sure, right? So
It's still an issue of stress. So I'm glad
right.
that you brought this up
Mhm.
because you could be sitting there saying, I have 10 hours available to me, no problem. So you develop that training plan to be a 10-hour plan. But the problem is that your body can't absorb 10 hours of training. And so your body may be only able to absorb and recover from 8 hours of stress that you put on the body through training. So even though you have the availability of 10, you can only absorb 8. And so that's something also that we have to keep in mind is that it may not be availability that is your limiter, it's the body that you have in order to absorb it. I find this to be also the case when I work with older athletes as well. They have all the availability that they could possibly want,
Yeah, they're
but
the
the
retired
issue is
person.
what can their body handle and what can they
Handle.
recover
Right,
from?
that too.
And so that's another really important thing. So when I coach older athletes, I may use a different model in terms of,
Mhm,
we may move from that 7-day model to a 10-day
mhm.
model. It's just a different way because I need more time built in order to aid recovery. And I think that this is one of the things that most athletes do not consider when they build their training plan is the amount of time that is going to be required for some purposeful recovery. And this is going to be stuff like stretching, rolling, whether you use mobility stuff, percussion therapy, compression
Mhm.
therapy, heat therapy, cold therapy, all the other types of therapy modalities. I think
Maybe a
that many
massage.
people completely ignore it and they only focus on,
Right.
hey, I've got 10 hours available to myself. So they
Mhm.
stack on 10 hours of training, aerobic or strength-based training at 10 hours. And then they realize, oh, I need more in order to recover. And so one of the things that I did this year for my own training was for the first few months of the year, I built in the recovery stuff as workouts. So if you look at my training peaks, you'll see sauna time, 30 minutes. You'll see Normatec doing the legs for 60 minutes here. Another workout of 20 minutes of percussion therapy and rolling. Because that was one of the things that I did was I was so bad at the recovery stuff that I didn't have an appreciation for how much time is required to do that, to keep me healthy enough to be able to do the aerobic stuff. And so I really wanted to build that appreciation in my mind. And the only way that I could see that is if I saw it on the screen and I saw the green and I
Right.
saw it's like, oh, wow.
Because you're motivated by having the
Yeah.
green,
I
like
know that my training plan was 8 hours of aerobic training, 8 hours of strength training, but I had a 20-hour a week training plan. And I looked at it, I was
a
like,
lot.
man, this
Okay.
is a lot. And it's because I built in like
Right.
4 hours a week of recovery stuff spanning over
Mhm.
7 days, which is not unrealistic at all if you really like account for it. And so I think it really was a great exercise for me to gain that appreciation that I needed. And also when I talk with other athletes, and I think that this is something that I definitely bring up now where I didn't used to bring it up before, is like, okay, you have the 10 hours available, but let's think about this as well. You may have 10 hours available. Your body may be able to absorb 10 hours, but we're completely ignoring the recovery stuff. And so if I tell them, it's like,
Right.
we're getting into the training plan, they're just like, oh, my calves are hurting and stuff like that. Then we didn't account for the time of managing and trying to do something that's purposeful to aid recovery. We're just hoping that the body does it on its own, and that's not going to be the case all the time. So,
Right. And I wanna just put this out there too. We usually have more time, but you just, maybe you have to find it.
yeah,
Like, it's when you're scrolling on your phone on which is fine, because I do that, but then maybe I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna do my mobility, and I'm gonna listen to a podcast, or I'm gonna, okay, it's nighttime and we're about to go to bed. I have 10 minutes. I could just sit here, which is what I wanna do, and just do nothing, but I'm gonna do my mobility." And
yeah,
so, there's usually more time you can kinda carve out for that, and I found, yeah, like, instead of wasting my time, I don't know, on YouTube or something, I can probably multitask and like watch this video and do my mobility or my percussions, like Theragun, those types of things that I can need to be doing for recovery. Like I can multitask and do them if I'm watching TV or something, and also just trying to chill. And generally, like I think that especially the mobility at the end of the day is a little bit relaxing because you're stretching and there's something kind of relaxing about that. So it could be kind of built in that way. If you're not wanting to, like, put it in as a actual workout, I think just trying to figure out looking through your whole day and figure out those, like, idle moments and multitasking. Yeah, some days I kind of feel like I'm just, like, boom, boom, boom all day long. I never really had a time to sit down and relax, but that's because I'm trying to maximize my day the best I can, and
yeah,
I have to fit in the mobility. So if usually, you find the time for the running or you have the time available for, like, the workouts and stuff, you can usually find extra time, and if you find that you can't find that extra time, then I would say then it's like you have to go in and be realistic. Okay, I really don't have 10 hours
right,
of,
yeah,
volume for aerobic exercise and strength training. I have to then carve in some of that towards this other stuff
yeah,
because it is so important. It is. It's a big part of it.
yeah,
And I think that that's where people kind of get into trouble. Even just thinking about like this would be maybe more in that weekly topic, but like you have an hour and a half total to train, maybe even in that, like, a lot of people are like, "Okay, I have an hour and a half, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna run an hour and a half." But you probably wanna think about, like, the warming up of it, like some activation drills and just little things to get your body ready
yeah,
to go, or even when you get back, like, having a little time to just stretch a minute, get yourself warmed down, like, kinda just get yourself ready for the day a little bit instead of just jumping right into the next task. And I know I'm guilty of that sometimes,
yeah,
but I find when I carve out that time to do that stuff, my workout goes 100% so much better.
yeah,
Like, not 100% better, but lots much better, or even just the time to, like, be done and refuel even. If I haven't thought about that part of my training, then I'm missing out on a very important aspect of, like, even just recovering adequately or being ready for the workout to begin with, and so I think that people are very guilty of that. "Oh, yeah, I have an hour and a half a day of,"
yeah. I am
and
too.
then they thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna do that entire hour and a half is all going to be aerobic
Yeah,
exercise, or my running or my cycling," and it's like, well, really, you need a little bit of buffer on each end to do some of that important stuff, right?
yeah,
If you're creating your own plan, I really encourage you to think about that. when you're looking at your time, because it's not all going to be just training,
Right.
and if that's all you're doing, I think you're setting yourself up maybe for injury or not recovering or not, fueling adequately, that kind of stuff.
I think it's funny that you brought this up because I'm actually working with an athlete right now who, when we started working together, I would just put in just her workouts. And
Mhm.
I told her, I said, you know what? I'm going to operate under the assumption that you're doing your pre-workout stuff. You're doing, before you go for a run, you're doing your activation stuff, you're doing your stretching, your dynamic mobility, that kind of stuff. I'm operating under the assumption that you are doing that. And she said, put it in as a workout. So,
Mhm.
you
I've
know,
done that for athletes, yeah.
and so right now in her plan is there's the run, and then there's I think it's like 10 to 15 minutes or something like that of just pre-run warm up, or pre-run activities or whatever it is that we're going to call it, because it helped her become accountable for it, because she
Mhm.
said, if I see it, I'll do it. If I don't see it, I'm not
Right.
going to do it. And it was such a great lesson to me, personally, as an athlete and as
Right.
a coach, that she really kind of opened my eyes. Is like, you know what, she's right. And that's when I started to experiment with this stuff. It's like, okay, well, let me put in my recovery stuff as actual warm-ups or as workouts to hold me accountable for doing it, and to get an appreciation as to what are all the other
Mhm.
stuff that I'm not doing that I need to do in order to stay healthy and progress like I want to.
Yeah.
And so I'm really eternally grateful to her for having the guts to say, no, just put it as a workout, just put it in there, because
Just put it in there
it
for
was
me and make
great.
it easy.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate
Yeah.
that she did that, and it
Yeah.
taught me
I've
something.
done that
So
for athletes too, who I think would really benefit from some sort of pre-workout activation, like sort of mobility stuff that I'll put in there. And so I do that I've done that for myself, but I have done that, like some band work or some just different drills and things, like, because it's like, oh, if I just tell them to do it, sometimes they don't know what I'm asking of them to do. They're like, well, there's a million different like videos on this or things that I could be doing that I found online. And I found for me, like, if it's just like relying on me to just do something, it isn't. I don't know. Sometimes I know what I need to do, but there's a million different types of drills and
right,
things I
yeah,
could be doing. So if I kind of put it out there, like, this is what I'm going to be doing, either it's in like this mobility app I follow that they have some activation, like movements that they just sort of set and you follow it, or it's something I've set in Training Peaks or something. But I find that very helpful, like to even offer that to some of my people I work with. It's just like, do you want me to put in some warm up, or even for a race, like, I'm gonna
yeah,
put the
mhm,
warm up drills in there. There might be some videos in there, but I want you to watch like how to maybe do strides correctly, or how to do the skips, the A skip, B skip,
yeah.
some of those skipping movements, like, and then that's kind of what I want, and this is kind of how much I want you to do, and this is what you're gonna do, and it's very helpful, I think, and then they feel like, okay, I've got something. It's not just like relying on
Yeah.
them to like figure it out. So it's something I do, and I kind of enjoy doing that because, yeah, it is important.
All right, so I think that we've done a pretty good job now, I think, of laying the foundation. So we've poured the footers for the house, and so now let's start to frame this house up. So now that we've had the consultative part of the discussion, now it's our job as a coach to sit down and start to map this out.
Hey, everybody, this is Coach Katie, and I'm actually jumping in here because we're going to end this podcast, this first section right here. And we're going to come at you next week with the second part of the episode. So we're going to actually break it into three-part episode. So we're going to have then a third portion coming at you the following week. So this episode was all about laying the foundation, the things that we might ask athletes that we're working with, and the things that we really want you to encourage thinking about yourself when you're planning your training plan. So, this may sound like kind of an episode about coaching and what we do as coaches, but in reality, if you aren't working with a coach, or you are working with a coach and they aren't asking you these types of questions, maybe that is something to think about. Is these are very important things that coaches should be asking. But also, if you're just writing your own training plan, I think kind of giving these things a thought. for instance, like how much time you have, but really how much time do you have to train? And also considering the time that you need for recovery, mobility, all of those things, and fueling. So it's not always, I have 10 hours to train. It's maybe you actually have 7 or 8 hours to train and you have to dedicate 2 of those hours to other things that are going to help support your training. So that's sort of what we're talking about here. We also want you to consider things like injury history. And of course, I talk a lot about your why and why are you doing what you're doing, and really having that deeper reason. It doesn't have to be always something extremely deep, but it has to be something that is going to get you out of bed in the morning when it's dark and cold outside, for instance. So we're laying the foundation. Next week, we're going to come at you with a discussion all about volume and how we think about building a training plan in volume. And then that third part is actually going to be like the week itself. How are we thinking about structuring that plan? Once we have an idea of the weekly volume, then kind of coming in and getting down to the nitty gritty of how we're looking at a whole week's worth of training and how we might structure that. So we've got 3 parts. This is part 1. We'll see you next week for part 2 with a discussion more on volume, and then a third part coming out the week after that. So thank you so much. I do want to mention, please, if you can, leave us a rating and review in wherever you listen to your podcast. That would be super helpful. Share our podcasts with others if you think that they might enjoy and get some benefit from it. So please share, please subscribe, please like, and review us if you can. We do really appreciate your feedback. And as always, if you want to find us, we're on Facebook at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and you can do the private group, the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group, all on Facebook. You can email us at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com, and you can reach out to us individually. So Justin is at tabularasaracing.com, and I'm at fuel2run, so the number 2run.com. And we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out, even if it's just for a question or something you want us to talk about on the podcast. We'd really appreciate it. So thank you so much. And we'll look at coming at you next week with the second part of this 3-part series. All right. Bye.
That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.